Welcome to another podcast in our series entitled Midrash as a Psychological Backstory to the Bible. And welcome to our guest therapist, Yitzi Horowitz, who has quite an interesting and well-rounded background in psychology. I will post Yitzi's background below. So welcome, Yitzi.
Hello. It's nice to be with you.
Thank you. Okay, so I just want to say quickly the format that we have here is I'm going to present a biblical narrative and from this ancient Rabbinic text, the Midrash is going to comment on the narrative from the Bible, and I may have some of my layman's take on it, and then we'll go into some real interesting areas. So this is a deep dive that we're going to do. We're talking about here the Garden of Eden, a man being kicked out of the Garden of Eden, all starting with the episode that we're going to be talking about. I actually call it the Pathology of a Serpent in the Paradise. And so let me just start with the biblical verse. I'm in Genesis chapter 3, verse 6, and it says, "Now the serpent was the shrewdest of all the wild beasts that God had made." Okay, so right away we're getting, again in a literal sense, we're getting an idea from the Bible that we're not dealing with an animal that it doesn't have intelligence. We're talking about something at a much higher level. The next verse goes on to say what this snake said to the woman. So already something else surprising. We're finding out that this the serpent actually can talk, and in other places the Midrash says that it can walk. So we have to I guess to put our heads in the right place, we have to think of this as a walking, talking, human-looking creature that had a tremendous intelligence. And so now maybe we begin to understand how he could have persuaded Eve to do something. In this case, he wanted her to eat from the forbidden fruit, and he was actually hoping that it would be her husband, Adam, that would get punished, because he was the one told directly by God not to eat from this forbidden tree, and then the two of them would ride off in the sunset. However, just the background I want to give is that the Midrash seems to imply that this all came from a place of rage. And what do I mean by that? So if you think about this animal, here it is in what we know as the animal kingdom, somebody that was endowed by the Creator with way more gifts than any other animal. If you go to the zoo, you're not going to have a conversation with anybody, and everything there looks like an animal. Here, this serpent had, could walk the walk and talk the talk. It could interact with humans, and that was a tremendous gift. And it could have gone through life with tremendous gratitude. Wow, I can't believe I am not stuck hanging out with lizards and crocodiles. I can talk to these humans. However, an anger rose in this creature because it said, "But I'm not one of them. I'm not one of those humans. I can talk, I can interact, but I'm not one of them. And damn it, I want to be one of them. And I'm so angry. I'm going to have to come up with this plot of how I could get there. That's my goal. I want to. If I could maybe marry her, I could then be in the club. But right now, I'm out of the club." And so it's a very interesting balance between, looking with gratitude of what you have versus the anger of setting very high expectations that you can't get, and everything, all the trouble you can get into for that. And the trouble in the case of mankind was we got kicked out of the Garden of Eden, all because of this struggle that this serpent was going through. So that's my sort of layman's take. And now we'll get the professional take. And, so Yitzi, tell me what you make of this story from a psychological standpoint.
Thank you. I specifically, when we think of this narrative, to not just think of it as an interpersonal story, but to think of it as what we would call an intrapsychic story. That the serpent has an internal quality that each and every one of us has, this energy inside of us, so to speak. What you said just feels very resonant. This creature is a half animal. It's part animal, but it also has these human qualities to it. It has knowledge, it has intuition, it has sophistication, it seems to have some kind of emotional world, it can talk, it can walk, and seemingly it is very human. At the same time, it's not human. It's a serpent. It's a snake. When humans were created, humans were given a body made out of the earth, and it says in the biblical narrative that God blew a breath into this clay of earth, and the human being came to be. So humans are kind of half earth and half divine, and this creature is half animal and half human. So I'm thinking about it simply as what we would call our instincts, and perhaps I would say that the serpent is not an instinct; the serpent is impulse. Mm-hmm. That every one of us has instinct. The question of the serpent is what happens when our instincts are not fully made conscious? What happens when our instincts are not fully integrated and we act impulsively on them? And here, what we're talking about specifically is anger. Mm-hmm. Anger, which is on the one part based on some kind of instinct that this snake has about itself. The serpent has some kind of instinct. We don't quite know what it is. But instead of allowing for the instinct to become integrated, instead of learning what this instinct is about, instead of paying attention and spending time with and reflecting on what is this pull that it has towards the woman? What is the pull that it has towards the apple? What is this pull that it has towards knowledge? Because in the story, there's something here about knowledge, the knowledge of good and evil, not to eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Instead of spending time getting to know what all these instinctual pulls were, the serpent decides to act. And it acts impulsively. It takes the raw material of the instinct and acts on it as if it knows exactly what it needs and exactly what it wants. What would be an example of this in our lives? Let's take food, our relationship with food. You know, it's an interesting thing. I'm not removing myself from this in my own relationship with food, but food is something very instinctual. So there's an instinct we all have around food. But what we all know, what we all see, especially in our generation today, in the parts of the world that we live in, food is abundant, and our relationship to food is very impulsive. So if it's 11:30 at night and I find myself reaching for a piece of food, and I haven't quite really spent time with, am I bored? Do I need to unwind? Is there something about my day that is unsettling for me? Do I need to maybe take a walk? Instead of that, I make the automatic move to eat. That's impulse. That's an example of where my instinct is not actually getting integrated. I'm not quite sure what I need. I think I know what I need. I go for what I need. I do the thing. So the snake for me represents a half-cooked instinct. You referenced something about anger. The snake is angry. The snake is jealous. It has a streak of anger to it. It demands to get what it thinks it wants. It demands to get what it knows it wants, but it doesn't have the humility and the vulnerability to sit with getting to know the desire. You see, desire, and we can talk about this much more at length, but desire always has an address. I am desirous for A, B, and C. And the problem with that is that A, B, and C is almost always never what the desire is about. Desire itself is meant to keep us in a kind of a liminal space, half animal, half human, to allow us to stay with the tension between I want this, but I have that. I want to be able to stay with. These are the things I have. These are the things that I want. How am I going to work that? How am I going to allow the tension between those two things to work itself inside of me, to produce something new, rather than saying, I need to get that thing, or the opposite. I'm not going to listen to that. I'm just going to reject that impulse or that urge. To allow ourselves to sit in that liminal space. That's what I would say is the reading of what the problem of the serpent is. It's the impulsivity to move too quickly with desire rather than sitting with it and getting to know it.
Okay, I like the way you summed that up. What's interesting is that when you put it all together, you see a serpent that, as you say, acted impetuously, without weighing the consequences, not even from its own psyche, and certainly not from this higher power who had just created him and the entire world in the previous 5 days. And this higher power would certainly have the power to stop the serpent from his plan of knocking off Adam and marrying Eve. So I guess it's even clearer now to me why the Jewish tradition portrays the serpent as the embodiment of the evil incarnation. Okay, so here's another question. Where would a healthy person develop the ability to, as you say, sit with the emotions, think about them, evaluate whether they're healthy or not, whether they're attainable or not, where it's coming from? Is that something that you are raised with? Does one need to have some kind of system of from a higher power that gives them some kind of a source of ethics that you have to go by? Where does it generally come from?
So I would make a plug for saying on a very, very basic level, just make a plug for each and every one of us in our lives to go back to learning how to be reflective, how to spend time with ourselves, to reflect on, what did I do over the course of the day? Not so much was that the right decision, but was that decision in line with my higher self? Did that decision get me to the place that I thought it would? If I did eat that thing at 11:30 at night, was that really the thing I needed? And not to be upset with ourselves. This is not about being judgmental or critical. It's just simply a plug for good old self-reflection. How did this work? What was this like for me? To be in a relationship with myself where I can reflect backwards on how things were, to allow myself to know where are those places in my life that I need to pay more attention to. Therapy is what we do when the self-reflection doesn't work. Therapy is what we do when we see that we're kind of caught up in some kind of space where I can't do it on my own. So then we go to therapy. That's kind of a higher level, if you will, of being self-reflective. But having a relationship with a higher power, having a relationship with a spiritual source that allows for more meaning in my life and allows for more breathing in my life, certainly would be included in this. But that could be a whole further conversation.
So what I feel coming through very loud and clear, since this is happening in the beginning of human history, the very beginning, the first week even, that perhaps the Bible is trying to tell us a message for all of mankind for all of time, and now we have the different perspective of thousands of years later to look back, and we can see how we messed up by not achieving what you are suggesting people do. In other words, it's not just let's say the first murder, which is going to happen a little later on in the story, but even wars and all kinds of terrible tragedies and things that mankind wreaked upon each other, all because somebody in some position thought they were so important and their needs had to be met, and nobody had to reflect and say, but what are the consequences? Where is this coming from? Is this ego driven? Who's going to suffer from this? It seems like this is placed in the first story because it was a chance that we had to learn a lesson and not blow it. Although I guess you could say, too bad we blew it. Yeah. So I'd like to conclude with an insight in how this ancient rabbinical text, the Midrash, works. So a lot of the case built against the serpent was predicated on the idea that it was angry at its status and what it could have achieved and not being grateful for what it had. But where is this in the text, you might ask? Unfortunately, if you don't have the Hebrew text, you wouldn't see it, because in English, when it gets translated, it covers over that source, that word that is sticking out and calling out to the to those who are working on this and saying, find out why I use this unusual word here and not a different word. I'm sending you a message. I'm giving you a clue. Can you figure it out? And so here in the story, so I read the first sentence from Genesis 3, 6, that the serpent was the shrewdest of all the wild beasts that God had made. And then the next verse says, and the serpent said to the woman, did God really say that you should not eat of any of the trees in the garden? So again, in that, there's nothing sticking out in that English sentence, but in Hebrew, there's one word that has several meanings. The word af can mean, is that really so? And it could mean nose, which also means anger, because it's usually when nostrils are flaring when you have anger. So that word is stuck in there, and that was the clue that this ancient rabbinic source said, there it is, hiding in plain sight. This is a story of the consequences of anger, of the anger that comes from, something that you think you want and the lack of gratitude for what you already have. And so I just wanted to point it out that that's the source of all this. But I thank you very much for taking it to a much deeper level and giving us sort of like a real world way to not fall in this trap and to navigate these same instincts that might rise in us and not have them run away and all kinds of unwanted consequences.
I appreciate it. Nice to do this with you.
Okay, great. All right, so thank you very much again. And this was again our podcast on Midrash as the psychological backstory to the Bible, and we were honored to have our guest Yitzi Horowitz explain this to us, and we look forward to again doing a deep dive into other parts of the Bible and getting maybe another clue from some word of where it what emotions this Midrash wants to play with.